In this video, we're looking at solving algebraic equations. And what we're going to do for each of the two problems that I have here is we're going to look at them and identify what kind of equation we have, and then talk about the process that we're going to go through for solving them. Starting with this first one here, 8x minus 5 raised to the 2/5 power is equal to 9. Now, you'll notice here that x is just x. It's linear. But the big guy who's in our way is the 2/5 power right here. So the way we can undo powers like this is to use what's called the power property. So we can raise both sides of the equation to the same power. And we could pick any power that we want to, but we want one that's going to help us get rid of the 2/5 power. So we use its reciprocal, 5/2. And I apply that to the left, and I also apply it to the right side of the equation. So remember that when you have a power to a power, you would multiply these guys. And since they are reciprocals of each other, a fraction times its reciprocal gives us 1. So we would just have 8x minus 5 to the first power, which is just itself. On the right side of the equation, we have a rational power. And what we need to understand and remember is this little property right here. X to the m over n means that you are going to be doing the nth root of x. And then that's going to be raised to the m power like that. So it's really easiest to take the root first and then apply the power. Now here we notice that we have an even root. So the even denominator means we have an even root. So this becomes the square root of 9. But since we're the ones who are applying an even root, we're applying a square root here. We're going to have to remember the plus or minus because this is connected to the square root property. And then this is going to be all raised to the 5th power. So for these next couple steps, the left side of the equation just gets brought down. Over here, we have plus or minus the square root of 9, which becomes 3. And that's raised to the 5th power. And then over here, when we raise a positive number to the 5th power, we get a positive. If we take a negative to the 5th power, we also get a negative. And 3 to the 5th power is 243. And then we go through the steps of getting x by itself. So that's simply adding 5 to both sides. So 8x is equal to 5 plus or minus 243. And then we divide both sides of the equation by 8. Now, I know we've got the plus or minus here, but we can't leave our answer like this. And the reason we can't leave our answer like this is because you see that we have plus or minus, an integer. So that means that we need to separate this into our two answers. One of these, where we have 5 plus 243 divided by 8. And then you have the other part of this, which is x is equal to 5 minus 243 divided by 8. So take these guys individually and simplify this. So that's 248 divided by 8, which gives us 31. And then here, we get negative 238 divided by 8. And we have to simplify this guy. Now, I think the best that we can do here is to reduce by, let's see, a common factor of 2. So we have negative half of 238 is 119 divided by 4. So not the prettiest number that we've ever seen, but it is our solution. All right, so let's see what we have here. Oh, look at this one. Somebody gifted us a quadratic equation. They love us so much. Now, for this guy, we go through the progression, right? We first think, can I use the square root property? Well, I've got x squared and x, so the square root property just doesn't apply. Then we try to factor. Well, with 209 here, we won't be able to find factors of that add to 26. All right, So then we go to completing the square. Is this a good problem for completing the square? Well, you've got a lead coefficient of 1, and you have an even middle term. So yeah, this is great for completing the square. So for us to complete the square, this is where we move the constant term to the other side. So this becomes negative 209. If there were a coefficient other than 1, you would divide everything by that. But since we have a 1, we're in good shape. Now we expect in this next step, to have something that factors. It's going to factor as a square. Now we're going to force the hand to make it factor this way. So we know how this should factor, and it should be half of 26. That's going to be negative 13. And you square that 13, that negative 13, and that's what fills in the gap right here with a plus 169. So a lot of times they would say, you've got to find this number first and then factor, but we know that we're going to be factoring anyway. So I say, go ahead and divide this by 2. That goes in the factorization. You square it to get this. And then you have to add that to the other side of the equation as well, because you must maintain balance. That is imperative. Negative 209 plus 169 is negative 40. And what we've done with completing the square is that we rewrite the quadratic equation, this quadratic equation, into something that can then use the square root property. So take our trusty light blue pen and apply a square root on both sides. Remember, since we are the ones who are introducing the square root, we must remember the plus or minus. So we have x minus 13 is equal to plus or minus. Now we have to see how we simplify the square root of 40. So 40 breaks down as 4 times 10. Take the square root because these guys were inside the square root. And this guy gives me 2. Not only that, but please pay attention to the fact that you have the negative inside. So you get a 2 on the outside from the factor of 4. The negative gives us the I, and the factor that stays inside is 10. And then just one last step to get x by itself. And that is to add 13 to both sides. So x is equal to 13 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 10. Not really the prettiest number that we've ever seen, but these are the solutions to this equation. We use completing the square. You could have used the quadratic formula, but that would have led to much larger numbers and things that, frankly, I didn't want to have to deal with. So if you can complete the square, that's going to be my recommendation to you. All right, have a good one.